Kila was in the Israeli occupying force. And not only that, but also literally participated in a raid in the West Bank, which is illegal. Israeli military presence in the West Bank is illegal. Ethan himself has said that West Bank settlers are open season targets. Like if random Yemeni TikTokers are terrorists, then what is your wife at that point? You know what I mean? Like, that's a war crime. The only difference here is that America doesn't consider that to be a war crime because Israel is an extension of America, criticizing those who speak out against Israel's atrocities, criticizing those who are actually doing anything against Israel in terms of making Israel incur a penalty for the crime of doing a genocide. What's the expectation here? That the Palestinians are simply supposed to just die and the rest of the world is supposed to let them die and then turn around and say, oh, we felt so bad? Is that what it is? So we can feel good about ourselves? Do a land acknowledgement? Confused Zionism of Ethan Klein. It's a really good video. He has a new channel that I guess, or a smaller channel, and this video already picked up a lot of steam. 153,000 views in a matter of 3 days. And a lot of people who've suggested that this is a good video.
Crime is wanting a two-state solution instead of one, and thinking it's not okay to kill Israeli civilians. That's it.
At the end of January this year, Ethan Klein of H3H3 Productions posted what is undeniably one of the most popular pieces of pro-Israel propaganda that the internet has seen in months. The video boasts more than 200,000 likes and over 3 million views. And whilst Ethan would probably balk at this video being called pro-Israel, it was even initially sponsored by ExpressVPN, an Israeli-owned company whose owners have extensive links to the Israeli military through funding it, and also even going as far to fund trips for Israeli soldiers perpetrating the genocide in Gaza to go back and see their family. Now, the original goal of Ethan's video was to deplatform and discredit the Twitch streamer Hasan. However, the video has backfired because although Ethan had been on a near 15-month-long crash out from October of 2023 until January of 2025, what Ethan did is expose the paradoxical nature of his position, which he maintains is pro-Palestine, to an even larger audience than before. Put simply, you cannot maintain the notion that you are pro-Palestine when you use your YouTube platform of nearly 6 million subscribers to spread the exact same talking points that have been utilized by the Israeli government to justify the extermination of tens of thousands of Palestinian people. Now, I have already made multiple videos on this which have accumulated well in excess of 1 million views on TikTok, but like Ethan Klein has chosen over and over again to ignore these videos in favor of going after smaller content creators who often make jokes at his expense but do not offer succinct criticisms of his thought. So what I thought I would do is critique Ethan's thought and demonstrate that he is not at all pro.
I don't like Ethan, but that seems like a bad ruling. I think the reason why he came after that specifically, the Ponzi scheme aspect of it specifically, is because it was the most overtly defamatory statement. Like other shit that Ethan has done in the process, while annoying, certainly from the perspective of the person that's being trolled, is not as easy to prove. Considering that it was a retracted article, I think it seems like going along with it. Wait, Ethan acknowledged on air it was retracted? Like, I'm not in favor of any fucking billionaire being able, any wealthy person, whether it's Ethan Klein or Ryan Kavanaugh, being able to successfully stop someone from speaking, like, because you don't like what they're saying. Part of the reason why I'm like, part of the reason why I always say, like, I don't give a fuck about whatever Ethan is chirping about whenever people are like, why don't you sue him, is because I think it's like a very bitch-made thing to do. even if it's like an open and shut, even if there's an open and shut case, like Ethan openly acknowledging that in his own words while sitting next to me, that like the brothel that I went to in like fucking 2010, getting raided for tax evasion in 2016, and then successfully suing both the police force and the Berlin government over defamation and winning. Like he knew all of that and still went along with it recently, right? Like implying a bunch of horrible things. Like even if that in and of itself is like a fairly easy way to prove, especially paired up with like malicious intent, considering that he has said that he wants me to lose everything and that he hates me and all this stuff. I feel like there's a case there. I would never do such a thing because I think it's just stupid. It's a stupid thing to do. Like, I don't know. Anyway, let's watch this.
Palestine, because he is nothing more than a Westerner whose thought is dominated by Orientalism, and he therefore simply cannot offer a succinct political understanding of anything to do with the Middle East. Now, the concept of Orientalism was proffered by Edward Said. It was the first thing that I learnt about when I started my Middle Eastern Studies degree as an undergraduate back in 2019, and what it basically refers to is a distinction between them and us, them being non-Westerners and us being Westerners. And according to Said, this was produced through discourse, and what he meant by this was anything from travel writings, newspapers, stories, depictions, anything that you could think of which created a vision of people from the Middle East or the wider Orient. It is at its most basic media which seeks to create this distinction between them and us, and Ethan's video is a perfect example of it. Through this Orientalism and the discourse it produces, an essentialized image of the Oriental or Middle Easterner is created that is backwards, uncivilized, violent and savage, which is juxtaposed against the civility of the Occident or the West. Now, what is important to note here is that Orientalism is dialectical. It is not just about denigrating the other, creating this barbarous savage. It has always been about making Westerners feel superior, feel better about themselves, and so as to establish themselves as moral and enlightened, even when their politics and behaviour shows an exact opposite. Ethan's content around Palestine is a perfect example of this. He consistently deploys Orientalism to assuage his own feelings and to maintain the notion that he is pro-Palestine, and so he never has to avow the disgusting right-wing talking points that he spreads and the violence that these inflict on Palestinian people. Take this part of Ethan's so-called content nuke, where he speaks gleefully about the assassination of senior Hamas figures.
Disvalues, or, well, they were billionaires. Because they're all dead. They're killed, they're all dead.
Or this part where he condemns Hasan Piker for his endorsement of Syed Hassan Nasrallah, the former leader of Hezbollah, who was killed in an Israeli strike last year.
Hezbollah is a paramilitary organization.
Do we like them or no?
They are a terrorist organization. Like they're designated. They are designated by the American state as a terrorist organization.
I do not like them then.
Well, like
I like what you like.
I don't have an issue with them. Let's just say.
This is Hezbollah's leader, Hassan Nasrallah. According to Hasan Piker, this man is a brilliant freedom fighter. But before we get into that, let's see how he...
Also, he stretched that statement as hard as he could, where I said, I don't have an issue with them, let's just say, to literally turn that into, he fucking... He fucking loves this guy, bro. Like, no explanation to undermine what I was saying. No context involved in that process. Clips are obviously cut. Did I say anything in between? Have I talked about Hassan Nasrallah extensively?
He feels about Jewish people. Here are some choice quotes from Hezbollah.
Also, then he turns around and fucking says that Hassan Nasrallah is anti-Semitic, which is ironic because one of his most famous statements is about how a lot of dumb Arabs are anti-Semitic when they don't realize that Israel is not operating at the behest of Judaism, but instead operating at the behest of American empire. Now, of course, if he was even remotely curious about even learning about his enemies, he would know that reality. But of course, he doesn't know that reality. If he actually had done his research on clips of mine, there are plenty of other clips where I've talked about Hassan Nasrallah or Hezbollah, as a matter of fact.
Leader Hassan Nasrallah. According to Shaul Shai, Hassan Nasrallah said in a speech delivered in Beirut, "What do the Jews want? They want security and money. Throughout history, the Jews have been Allah's most cowardly and avaricious creatures. If you look all over the world, you will find no one more miserly or greedy than they are."
Now, at first, I was just going to let this section of the content nuke play because it seemingly shows anti-Semitic statements by the leader of Hezbollah. But a quick look into this shows that much like the rest of Ethan's video, the sourcing is just absolutely terrible. He has gone on Wikipedia and repeated unequivocally what is put on there without bothering to check the veracity of anything. So let's quickly go through them. The first quote comes from the book of an Israeli official, Shaul Shai, the former head of the IOF's military history department, a lifelong Israeli soldier. So it may be that this man made up his claims, especially since the articles he cites in his book are almost impossible to find now. And we all know that Israel, its government and senior officials don't necessarily love telling the truth. The second quote is not actually from Nasrallah. The source that Wikipedia cites is noted to be incorrect in this 2012 article. It is not a quote from Nasrallah. The third quote is perhaps the most outrageous of all of them cited by Ethan, because it is noted on the Wikipedia page that this is likely a lie. It literally notes that
There's also direct quotes from him on camera, verbatim, talking about anti-Zionism and talking about, and for the record, make no mistake, I'm not here to fucking argue on whether or not Hassan Nasrallah has opinions that I agree with. There are certainly plenty of opinions of Hassan Nasrallah that I do not agree with, okay? Like opinions around gay people, or I don't even know. There's probably a million different things I don't fucking agree with Hassan Nasrallah. I still don't believe that he should have been assassinated alongside 2,000 fucking people in a Beirut suburb. Oh my God, what an insane fucking thing. I know.
that Charles Glass says that this was fake, and the managing editor of the newspaper that it was first published in said he had no faith in the article. The fourth quote is not from Nasrallah. The fifth, there is apparently no specific source provided in the book A Privilege to Die, but it does appear in the text of Hezbollah's Al-Ad, as well as in the same English language collection of Nasrallah's speeches. However, straight after is an emphasis that Hezbollah's fight is with Israel and not with Jews. The final quote is just a citation from the Ministry of Israeli Foreign Affairs. I am sorry, but I don't buy their nonsense so quickly. This is a ministry for a government that lies constantly. I mean, just this week, senior military officials in Israel felt comfortable lying about an overt war crime. They claim that Palestinian paramedics who were executed whilst driving their ambulances didn't have their lights on, were acting suspiciously.
Well, the IDF did not randomly attack an ambulance. Well, last Sunday, several uncoordinated vehicles were...
What is your thoughts on the Jews? I love my Jews. Also, there's another thing that I must repeat and reiterate here. Hassan Nasrallah was not murdered in a campaign of mass murder by the apartheid state conducting a genocide, Israel, for any of the reasons that Ethan or anyone else brings up with regular frequency. He was murdered by the state of Israel in an unjustifiable, illegal bombing campaign over a totally sovereign nation that unfortunately has to reside right next to the apartheid state for resisting against said apartheid state and trying to incur penalties upon the apartheid state for the crime of doing a fucking genocide. That is the reason. And that's the same reason why Yemen keeps consistently getting bombed. And that's the exact same reason why people are getting fucking black bagged on the middle of the street by the Gestapo here in the United States of America. It's all because in one way, shape, or form, people want Israel to stop its genocide, whether by speech or whether by force. That is the reason. Make no mistake. So yes, in that incredibly narrow set of circumstances, I do think that Hezbollah is in the right. Just like in that incredibly narrow specific set of circumstances, I think the Ansar Allah movement is in the right. What they are doing is moral in terms of enforcing a blockade to stop Israel from committing a genocide. I think it's moral for Mahmoud Khalil to also protest against Israel on U.S. soil, where he also, on top of everything else, has the constitutional right to be able to do that. Okay?
Identified advancing suspiciously toward IDF troops without headlights or emergency signals.
And now there is literal video evidence showing the exact opposite. Israel will say and do anything because they rely on morons like Ethan believing absolutely anything because it fits with their narrative that the other are barbarous and evil monsters who commit crimes constantly. But then consider Ethan's reaction to this clip of his wife.
Just the other day, Bibi fired a really good guy that a lot of people are pissed about, and he fired him because they had a disagreement, and that's like so Trump coded.
Well, he was like a moderating voice in the war room.
Yeah.
And he got rid of him, or at least a more moderate voice. I don't know anything about the guy. Just recognize his picture. He looked mean. I thought he was mean just because he looked mean.
No.
In the video, Hila is endorsing Yoav Gallant, Israel's former defense minister, a man who is wanted by the International Criminal Court, whose crimes far supersede any of those committed by either Nasrallah or any other leader of Hamas, the Houthis, or anyone you can think of. This is a man who said openly he wanted a total siege of the Gaza Strip.
אנחנו מטילים מצור מוחלט על העיר עזה. אין חשמל, אין מזון, אין מים, אין דלק. הכל סגור. אנחנו נלחמים בחיות אדם, ואנחנו נוהגים ב...
Yeah, I mean, just like this could be a good guy, even after being designated as a war criminal, okay? Ethan also does this exact same thing by falsely claiming that a TikToker dude who's 19 years old in Yemen is a fucking terrorist and a member of the Al-Houthi family, okay? Without any evidence whatsoever, and only evidence to suggest the exact opposite. Meanwhile, anyone, including those who have served in the IDF that might be very close to Ethan Klein, it's a bridge too far to call them a terrorist, even though the IOF is a terrorist organization, one that is far worse than Hamas, as a matter of fact. For the record, like, the standards are completely out of whack.
He is the man who prosecuted the genocide, which Ethan loves to say that he opposed.
And for the record, everybody knows, I hope at this point, what my opinion is I am much more understanding than other leftists in terms of people who have served in any military, as long as their current actions reflect that they understand the wrongdoing that they participated in. And this is included but not limited to, people who have become anti-Zionists in the aftermath of their service within the Israeli occupying force. There is, I think, because given my position, living in the heart of empire, living in a settler colony myself, I think I'm a little bit more understanding. It's if you are unapologetic and still continue to defend the Israeli occupying force, defend your service and all that, I think that's when we have disagreements. That's when I think you're not a good person. Just so everybody understands.
Moses, and yet he let his wife take a break with almost no pushback, even though she referred to him as a really great guy. Hila and Ethan's claim was that they didn't really know who Yoav Gallant was or what he was like, even.
But IOF and IDF are separate entities, because I thought IOF is the naming designation of the Israeli Defense Force. I refuse to call it the Israeli Defense Force because they're not defending themselves or defending anything, really. They're defending an occupying force, which is why people who are pro-Palestine will often call the IDF IOF, the Israeli Occupying Force, because that's what they do. That's what they are doing, and I think that that's a much better naming convention for the Israeli Occupying Force. They've called moral defectors selfish for not serving. Oh my God, yeah. Just do some war crimes. What do you mean? Why do you care? Why do you care? Just do a couple war crimes, man. Come on.
Though that clip of Yoav Gallant claiming that Israel was going to institute a total siege was noted by South Africa at the International Court of Justice and was a very popular clip for noting Israel's genocidal intent in Gaza. And so what I think that this is indicative of is either one of two things, which is that Ethan and Hila don't know anything about Israel-Palestine colonization and the wider Middle East North Africa region, which is undeniably true, or that Hila could not take the backlash when they avowed their actual views, which I think is the more likely of the two, because the idea that they just didn't know who Yoav Gallant was, one of the most senior figures in Israel's military, is fundamentally ridiculous. And so this would mean that Hila endorsed a man whose war crimes far eclipse any of those perpetrated by the organizations that Ethan thinks Hasan should be deplatformed for.
Yeah, like, unironically, once again, Hassan Nasrallah, even if you were to add Hezbollah's actions in Syria, okay? Even if you were to add Hezbollah's actions in Syria, which, by the way, Ethan does, but in the dumbest way possible, which, once again, shows how little he knows about anything, where he erroneously says that Hezbollah killed 500,000 people in Syria, which is the most psychotic thing I've ever fucking heard, overlaid in front of a city that has been barrel bombed, with the implication that Hezbollah has a fucking air force, okay? How did they do that? How did they kill 500,000 people and get access to barrel bombs and an air force? Shocking number.
Portraying in even a semi-positive light and offering context for why they do what they do. So why is it that Ethan just does not carry the same energy for when it comes to his wife in comparison to Hasan Piker? And what makes this even worse is that Ethan didn't just let Hila get away with this with basically no pushback. He actually took to his Instagram stories to defend her, arguing that the quote was...
Like, there's also, once again... This is a 56-month subscriber, progressive, pro-aggressive Omar. Hezbollah helped the Assad regime murder nearly 1 million Syrians. At Hasanabi, what are you talking about? The idea that, once again, first of all, I'm not even defending Hezbollah's actions in Syria, I'm simply defending an insane statement that you are making. You are doubling the number of total casualties on all sides with the assumption that it was Hezbollah and fucking simply the Assad regime's own military. Like there's the Russian military's involvement in Syria. There's obviously Hezbollah is involved in Syria as well. There are literally coalition forces, including Salafists that the Turkish government trained, for example, including, which is also another extension of NATO, by the way. Turkey's actions in Syria are an extension of NATO, just so you understand, make no mistake. So they're still American-backed by way of Turkey. And then also on the other side, direct American and CIA involvement in terms of the militia movements, the Kurdish militia movements in the region, specifically in Rojava. I'm friends with someone who went and fought in Rojava alongside the YPJ. I'm very good friends with someone who fought in Rojava alongside the YPJ, as a matter of fact. I've had him on this broadcast on numerous occasions. Okay? Do you deny the demographic change by Hezbollah? No, I don't know what the fuck. No, I don't know what you're talking about. I've never said anything about. Notice how you just made a fucking insane statement, okay, without mentioning any of the other parties involved, doubled the fucking casualty numbers in the entirety of the Syrian civil war, attributed it to mostly Hezbollah in a conversation where I'm saying, no, it's not fucking Hezbollah that's responsible for 1 million deaths, not the 5. Ethan didn't even make this claim, for the record. Ethan said 500,000, which is the total number of casualties in the Syrian civil war. I was in the process of explaining that Ethan is wrong for saying Hezbollah killed 500,000 people in Syria. It's fucking ridiculous. Okay? You doubled that number, said it was Hezbollah, and when you recognized that you were in the wrong, you turned around and moved the goalpost to something different. What are we doing? The fuck are we doing here? Following is 2406, but a 56-month sub. No, he is. He's a long-term community subscriber who probably fucking unfollowed and then refollowed.
As a result of being after October the 7th. I mean, he doesn't provide this kind of charity to people like Nasrallah or people from Lebanon, people in the Houthis or wherever, who have suffered under Western imperialism and larger terror attacks than October the 7th. No, he just thinks that this applies to Israelis only, and he doesn't seem fussed that his wife endorsed a man who referred to Palestinians as human animals, because whilst he seeks to make the distinction and say, oh, he was probably only talking about Hamas, the thing is that this was the man who oversaw the Gaza genocide that Ethan says he condemns, but he doesn't mind this man referring to Palestinians as human animals so as to establish them as subhumans worthy of death. No, he thinks that that's completely fine because he was a moderating voice who wanted to end the war. But he didn't want to end the war because of his opposition to the Gaza genocide. He just wanted to end the war because he thought all of Israel's aims had been achieved, and that no more aims could be achieved via military means. So all of the destruction and mass killing that was already perpetrated in the Gaza Strip, well, he thought that was enough. This isn't even the first time that Ethan or Gila have displayed their love for a figure who is undeniably implicated in racially...
Hasan, I'm telling you, you're not accurate. You're not accurate on Syria. With all love and respect, my people and I experienced the brutality of Hezbollah, not you nor Ethan. Dude, I'm not saying Hezbollah was a good force in fucking Syria. I'm simply stating that Hezbollah nor the Assad regime murdered 1 million Syrians, even though the total casualty number is closer to 600,000. And yes, a big part of that was Russian military involvement and the coalition forces under the command, or at least the directive, of Bashar al-Assad. There has never been a moment where I've defended Bashar al-Assad. I do not defend him at all. Okay? This conversation is about something entirely different. I'm not saying Hezbollah in Syria was a force for good.
Motivated slaughter. Take George Bush, for example, who in this 2017 clip, Ethan says he loves.
I gotta tell you, I saw George Bush on what was it, Jimmy Kimmel? And I was like, man, I love this guy. I love George Bush.
As a dude,
he's a fucking...
George Bush,
he's got a lot of character.
He's out there, dude.
You know, he's like painting. He just made a book of portraits. He's drawing portraits of veterans.
This was a guy who said he wanted to launch a crusade in the Middle East and then went on to do so.
And the American people are beginning to understand. Now, this crusade, this war on terrorism, is going to take a while.
Slaughtering hundreds of thousands of Iraqi people, all in the name of oil, something which Alan Greenspan, the former chairman of the Federal Reserve, literally admitted in 2006.
Hey, this is journalism. It's so weird. Motherfuckers want journalism, and when I'm trying to do journalism, they go, "Why are you doing that?" What do you mean? I'm just chilling. We're just vibing. Yeah, we're just vibing. We're vibing big time.
Hasan uncritically interviewed this kid for about an hour. It was the most brazen display of disgusting terrorist propaganda that I have maybe ever seen in Western media.
So if a 19-year-old from Yemen, who isn't even actually a member of the Houthis, but simply supports them, is an evil terrorist who shouldn't be allowed a platform, what does that make Ethan and Hila, people who endorse war criminals responsible for the slaughter of far, far more people than the Houthis?
Left.
Once again, also, Hila was in the Israeli occupying force. And not only that, but also literally participated in a raid in the West Bank, which is illegal. Okay? Israeli military presence in the West Bank is illegal. Ethan himself has said that West Bank settlers are open season targets. What the fuck? Like, if random Yemeni TikTokers are terrorists, then what is your wife at that point? You know what I mean? Like, that's a war crime. The only difference here is that America doesn't consider that to be a war crime because Israel is an extension of America.
All right. I always thought that despite our differences, there was one thing we could all agree on. And what was that? That we love America and everything she stands for.
And then there's this part of the content nuke, which has leapt out to me every single time I have watched it. Because why on earth would you say that everyone can agree on loving America? This is most certainly not a universal position. From Iraq to Cambodia, to Vietnam, to Afghanistan, to Korea, across the entire world, tens of millions, hundreds of millions, if not billions of people have suffered under the yoke of American imperialism just over the last century. And even the wider nexus of states that the United States supports is obscene. Take its two current closest allies in the Middle East, the United Arab Emirates and Israel. Both are countries currently facing genocide cases at the International Court of Justice. The United Arab Emirates for its involvement in Sudan, and Israel for its horrifying crimes in Gaza, which absolutely would not be possible without the rhetorical and material support that it was offered by both the Biden administration and the current Trump administration. If Israel didn't have the massive amounts of military aid which America only sells to them so they can maintain an edge over other countries in the region, it would stand no chance against countries like Iran. And so to sit there and say, oh, I love America and we all agree on this, whilst America is responsible for the genocide that he claims to simultaneously condemn, is fundamentally ridiculous. And it really does show you that Ethan just does not like anything which is anti-Western. Any group who is anti-West are differently evil. They are monstrous savages whose ideology has no explanation, who are fueled by anti-Semitic hatred in most cases. But when it comes to the obscene violence of the United States, oh, well, it's just politics and we all love it, really. I do not think the Orientalism which dominates Ethan Klein's thought could be any more clear. He sees a 19-year-old from Yemen, Rashid al-Haddad, as a monstrous, violent savage who is an anti-Semitic beast, which, by the way, the kid did apologise for, but he has no problem with his own thought. He never wants to confront the fact that he refers to America as something which we all love, even though it was the country which sold advanced weaponry to Saudi Arabia as it bombed Yemeni civilians. It was the country that refueled Saudi planes as they tore Yemeni weddings and other social events to pieces with their horrifying bombardment. It was the one who trained their pilots as they manufactured a siege and starved the people of Yemen. And this is what defined Rashid al-Haddad's life. And Ethan couldn't have some sympathy and say, you know what, this is what motivates this guy. This is why many Yemenis don't actually like the West. But instead of doing that, Ethan would rather sit there and essentialize them and try and portray this as it is some kind of innate anti-Semitism, some random hatred of the West. In the content nuke, Ethan literally refers to the Houthis as the bad guys.
All right, so these guys are clearly the bad guys. So my question is,
okay.
How does Hasan...
Oh, dude. Shit. My bad. I didn't know they were the bad guys. Okay. Well, how can I argue against that? Yeah. Yeah, suspiciously, this quote-unquote pro-Palestinian content creator is saying that virtually every group resisting against Israel's genocide, they're all the bad guys. Israel is bad too, but they're just like maybe less bad, maybe more bad, who knows? But these guys are definitely bad, okay? What's the argument here then? If you are pro-Palestinian, if you consider... Okay, pick you. If you're pro-Palestine, if you're pro-Palestinian emancipation, and you even at times agree that Israel is doing war crimes, sometimes you disagree with that, whatever. Maybe you believe that Israel is doing a genocide on Monday, but you don't believe it on Tuesday. Who knows? You keep calling it a war. Sometimes maybe you call it a genocide. I don't know if he does. Actually, I don't even know. Okay? But you keep saying every single person that is resisting against Israel's unjustifiable genocide of the Palestinians is wrong, immoral, barbaric, bad, then it's going to, I'm going to start to assume that you don't actually hate what Israel is doing. Especially if most of your commentary revolves around criticizing those who speak out against Israel's atrocities, criticizing those who are actually doing anything against Israel in terms of making Israel incur a penalty for the crime of doing a genocide. What's the expectation here? That the Palestinians are simply supposed to just die and the rest of the world is supposed to let them die and then turn around and say, oh, we felt so bad. Is that what it is? So we can feel good about ourselves? Do a land acknowledgement? Weird.
On cover such a genocidal, violent, misogynistic, homophobic, terroristic organization.
Which really does show his childish, marvelized understanding of politics, because if you think that the Houthis are somehow the evil baddies and America and Israel are some kind of axis of good, then I don't know what to say to you. You have the political acumen of a child. And Ethan's argument as to why they're the bad guys is the classic Orientalist tropes. He refers to their slavery based on some rather dubious evidence published by pro-Saudi outlets. And Ethan acts as if it is bizarre in his recent lawsuit to quibble with the State Department or what Saudi Arabian news outlets are saying. But anyone with a basic knowledge of how you write an academic essay or make an argument would tell you, well, if the Saudis are bombing the hell out of the Yemeni people and trying to claim that the Houthis are the evil of all evils, they might be willing to make things up. But what I think is most important to note about all of Ethan's condemnations of the Houthis for their regressive politics is that Israel, the progressive nation, which along with America he sees as the good guys, could be accused of all of these same things to a horrifying extent. I mean, take Israel's use of slavery. A recent article which appeared in Haaretz referred to the IOF practice of Israelis taking Palestinians as human shields and sometimes killing them for fun as a form of slavery. And when you think about it, denying these people autonomy and forcing them into a horrifying working environment is slave-esque, isn't it? And his highlighting of misogyny is the most obscene part, because yes, the Houthis are probably misogynistic. Misogyny is prevalent all over the entire world, but when it comes to Israel, the extremity of their gender-based violence is absolutely obscene. A recent UN report documented this disproportionate targeting of women and young girls. It targeted the use of sexual violence, how their reproductive rights are infringed upon by Israel. So stop sitting.
There's a lot more hard evidence, by the way, from the United Nations of Israel's standard practice of sexual abuse and systematic destruction of reproductive health care from the Israeli military against the Palestinian population, as opposed to the mass rapes directed by Hamas atrocity propaganda that Ethan unironically uses in his Context Puke. As of today, there is no hard evidence that mass rapes took place and was directed by Hamas, especially on October 7. There is, however, evidence for this. I doubt that Ethan has talked about this stuff. I don't know. Maybe he did.
Sitting there and pretending that you're some kind of defender of women's rights because you oppose the Houthis, but generally seem to have no problem with the IOF, and you haven't made a near 2-hour-long video about Israel's supporters, people like Lonabox, who Ethan literally invited on his show. It is absolutely ridiculous.
Yeah. This is who Ethan thinks is a good person to criticize Israel in the right way. A person who has talked about like Israel sniping children in the head and disparage those, disparage the hard evidence against such things, saying it's simply a mistake or an accident. Here he is smiling ear to ear in Israel alongside Sex Pestany with a former government employee. A former government employee of Israel, by the way. Like,
ridiculous. And Lonabox is a particularly important figure to highlight because Ethan, as I said, brought him on his show, but as the photo shows, he went on a trip to Israel, laughing and smiling along with Eylon Levy, Netanyahu's former spokesman, until he was fired over some personal issues. But
do you know how sniping jobs work?
Ultimately, this guy has sought to make a career out of justifying the extermination of Palestinians. He was a pivotal figure, appearing on Western TV, using his British accent, which makes him endearing.
Does Ethan even have clout on the left? He did at a certain point, but this is not the reason why there's a lot of focus on his work. He's a massive content creator with a fairly large audience. He literally restarted his formerly inactive YouTube channel, H3H3 Productions, in an effort to do this Hasbara, in an effort to do this cynical defense of Israel, while never really saying that he's like fully throatedly supporting Israel, but instead choosing to actively attack every single person who does criticize Israel and demand that they get deplatformed. So I think that it's pretty significant if a content creator, especially one that had so much clout in the past, is spending all of his time, effort, and resources instead of directing it towards I don't know, fundraisers for Palestinians, or instead of talking about the atrocities that Israel is committing. This is the overwhelming majority of his commentary on Israel's genocide. He goes after content creators no matter how large or small. So yeah, I think it's not about his clout necessarily on the left, but more so how much time, how much effort he spent, how much social capital he's actually destroyed in the process even. Ethan never had leftist clout. He had normie clout amongst mostly people who are, not meaning this critically, but the most common memesters normies. Yeah.
To Westerners to justify the extermination of Palestinians, to lie about what was going on in Gaza so it was plausible for Israel to carry out its genocide. And since this point, he's continued making videos, including one from the other day where he explained why Palestinians had no right to the West Bank. And yet Ethan just does not care. He's not making 2-hour-long videos about Loner Box. He's making 2-hour-long videos about Hasan, because he spoke to a 19-year-old. Hasan didn't spend time with the former spokesman of Benjamin Netanyahu, a man accused of leading a state perpetrating genocide. How can you reconcile the idea that you are pro-Palestine when you welcome Lonerbox onto your show and don't care about this, yet spend your time crying about Hasan interviewing a 19-year-old? It is a choice to make a video like this which sought to deplatform one of the biggest pro-Palestinian voices on Twitch. It is a choice to engage in smears of the...
It's not the YouTube drama, it's the YouTube drama clout he has. He can spit lies because no one will look it up. I have considered why these slop tubers hate on you, and it's because you do not auto-agree with them and you talk about things they do not know and it shakes up their worldview. Yeah, also, considering that a lot of my commentary revolves around undermining and directly tackling pre-established social conditioning that you get from an early age, whether it be unconditional support to Israel. This is pre-October 7, where most people had that social conditioning, or that these brown guys overseas are not like the scary monsters who are equipped with a copy of the Quran that says you have to kill all infidels, or whatever the fuck people believe, the Islamophobia that they learn. This makes it incredibly easy to just turn around and engage in reactionary commentary, even from the framework of being a supposed progressive liberal. If every outlet, if every institution that you trust when you're growing up, even as a progressive, even as someone who fancies themselves to be a liberal, is telling you that these are big, brown, scary bad guys and they're barbaric, then it's much easier for someone who also presents themselves as a liberal or progressive, or even, dare I say, pro-Palestine, to be able to engage in commentary such as this. This is literally the fucking... This is the basis for how Sam Harris made so much leeway with his Islamophobic sentiment while still maintaining the presence that he was a liberal. He was a high-minded, intellectual liberal.
Pro-Palestinian movement, and to seek to exoticize any form of resistance against the state of Israel. You do not refer to Israel as the bad guys. You do not condemn people who openly support Israel, even though it engages in these excesses. Take homophobia. You have Israel's Minister of Finance who said that he was a proud homophobe. He's in control of the economy. In control of the Israeli police is Itamar Ben-Gvir, a man who is also homophobic and once kicked a transgender person and organised a rally in Jerusalem where they paraded around farm animals to mock pride parades. And you sit there and go, oh, the Houthis, they're homophobic, they're this, they're that. It is just pinkwashing, Ethan. You are seeking to create a barbarous other who is unlike the Westerner, who does not share our values, and therefore they are the bad guys, and anyone who might seek to offer them any form of context is someone who supports evil, terroristic, genocidal entities. But your own wife who endorsed Gallant, she's your wife, it's understandable. October the 7th had just happened. And then you think about the West allies, the people who oppose the Houthis, the good guys, according to Ethan Klein, the nexus of pro-Western states. You have Saudi Arabia, most of the Gulf countries, who use the kafala system, something which is equivalent to modern slavery. They invite foreign workers over under promises that they're going to find new and great lives in Saudi Arabia. Then they take their passports and effectively offer them no rights. And many people have referred to this as modern slavery. So why is it the nexus of pro-Western states are the good guys in Ethan's political understanding? Because whilst Ethan might say, well, I'll condemn Israel, Israel. I'll condemn Saudi Arabia. This is what America and Israel have helped to set up and maintain in the Middle East for decades now. They want dictatorial regimes like those of Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, because these keep people quiet. You know, they will perhaps normalize with Israel, allow it to carry out its ethnic cleansing in the West Bank, the Gaza Strip, destroy any hopes of a Palestinian state, whilst they hide behind the idea of a two-state solution. Any time that these things are perpetrated by an ally of the West, it doesn't matter. It's not a problem which is indicative of how rotten and...
There's nothing more powerful than a quirked up white boy with a British accent, well equipped with a Middle Eastern Studies undergraduate degree. I didn't know. Someone said he had a PhD as well in Middle Eastern Studies. I'm telling you, dude, is OP. Because at the end of the day, no matter how white I am, people are going to be like, your name's Hasan, shut the fuck up. Okay? They hear a guy like this, they're like, wait a minute. On this issue, he's clearly not biased. You know, I have my biases.
Evil these ideologies are to the core. Instead, for Ethan, it is just okay. It is something that is basically not even worth mentioning because it's perpetrated by the allies of the country that he so loves. Now, Ethan, the definitely pro-Palestine content creator, like many other pro-Israel news outlets and Zionist content creators online, chooses to focus on the Houthi slogan, "Death to America, a curse upon the Jews, death to Israel, victory to Islam." And whenever I've watched someone's video, you know, they've highlighted that it's just a slogan from people who are oppressed. But what I don't think they've noted is that Ethan comes from a country with elected officials like Randy Fine. I mean, let's just read out one of the statements that he put out on Twitter. "There is no suffering adequate for these animals. May the streets of Gaza overflow with blood." This man, who is part of the most powerful government in the world, that is actually making the streets of Gaza overflow with blood currently, and has been for a year and a half, well, that's okay, you know. We don't focus on those as representing the rotten nature of Western society, a pervasiveness of terrorism. No, that's the country that Ethan loves. For Ethan, the Houthis, whose attacks on Israel pertain specifically to Israel's genocide in the Gaza Strip, I mean, they literally stopped when there was a ceasefire. He is more obsessed with their slogans than the comments and sayings of high-up US officials about exterminating people in the Gaza Strip. And it's not just Randy Fine. You've got others like Brian Mast and many, many other senior American politicians who are happy to talk about exterminating Palestinians as Israel, their closest ally, actually did that.
I would encourage the other side to not so lightly throw around the idea of innocent Palestinian civilians, as is frequently said. I don't think we would so lightly throw around the term innocent Nazi civilians during World War II.
The Houthis are not doing that. Theirs may be a slogan which people find offensive. However, ultimately, they are not actually perpetrating the things that they are claiming. But let's not just focus on America, the head of the snake. Let's also focus on Israel and the slogans that they love, because they're part of Ethan Klein's magical Avengers team who fight against the bad guys like the Houthis, Hezbollah and Hamas. But here's an article by the Israeli Gershon Shafir from 1984, who notes that at present Arabs are compared in sophisticated religious exegesis to the 7 Canaanite nations and to Amalek, and in a popular utterance to a donkey. Now, I think that this is particularly important because what you have here is documentation from the 1980s, before Benjamin Netanyahu had ever been Prime Minister, of Israelis referring to Palestinians as Amalek, a biblical enemy of Israel who must be wiped from the face of the earth. The same with the 7 Canaanite nations, the people who had to be destroyed for the existence of Israel. Why is it that people like Ethan love to talk about the Houthi slogans but don't like to talk about these? And this isn't even where it ends. What I'd also like to note is that in the 1980s, the slogan...
For the record, the Houthi movement, the Houthi movement's banner and its slogan saying "a curse upon the Jews" is, yes, absolutely unacceptable. But I think Norm Finkelstein's assessment on the situation is poignant, where it is the banner itself is directly as a consequence of Israel's actions, as Israel is seen as the only expression of Judaism in the region that every single person has experienced. That's the only thing they know. That's what it is. There's a very different attitude, and the statement Jews and Israel are interchangeable in the region. We look at this conflict from Western sensibilities and fail to recognize that difference. I'm not plucking my beard. I'm plucking my mustache.
Death to Arabs became popular to the point where Heike Grossman, an Israeli member of the Knesset and also a Holocaust survivor, would note that she found it so awful because the slogan was only one word different to the one that the Germans used to chant at her and that still rung in her ears. And it's worth noting that in the 1980s, this didn't end at just chanting death to Arabs at Palestinians. No, multiple Palestinians were attacked, and the Israeli press made some shocking discoveries in the Israeli military. They found squads of Israeli soldiers referring to themselves as the Mengele unit, who had extensive plans to mass murder Palestinians.
I've seen discourse of the slogan is calling Israel to curse upon the Jews and not the Houthis cursing the Jews. No, I don't think that's the case. I mean, I doubt it. I think that's just, again, Western copium from people who are anti-Israel. Hot take, Ethan knows he's in the wrong. He knows he's out of his depth on this issue, but he's built too big a hole for himself to climb out of. His ego won't let him. It's like when I know I'm wrong when I get a fight with my little brother, but I keep fighting anyways because I don't want to look dumb. Yeah.
So why is it that Ethan thinks that, someone who is a 19-year-old who supports the Houthis is a bad guy? He's an evil terrorist. But the same doesn't go for all Israelis. He might say, well, I don't like this excess. I don't actually support this kind of thing. Does every single Yemeni who rejects Israel, protests against it, and wants to take up arms against it, hold horrifying anti-Semitic views? No. There are many who just oppose the state of Israel because its treatment of Palestinians and hold a strong disdain for America because of what it has helped to do to their country for decades. But luckily for Ethan, this was the 1980s. The chant death to Arabs, it's not so popular anymore. Just a couple of fringe Israelis, they were the guys.
It's important to know the Houthis are Zaydis. The Zaydi imamate in Yemen was very beloved by Yemeni Jews. When the Zaydi imam was killed by Republicans, a Yemeni Jew poet wrote a requiem for him. Like Jews lived in Yemen since biblical days and did not face a single pogrom or prosecution like in Europe. Well, yeah, I mean, initially, pre-Israel, the entire MENA region, straight up across the board, with some exceptions of like Christian-backed pogroms under the Ottoman rulership, was seen as a safe haven as opposed to Russia or Western or Eastern Europe, as a matter of fact. Time and time again, Jews that escaped pogroms or even the Spanish purges that took place came to the Ottoman Empire because the Ottoman Empire was a safe haven. What about the tax under the Ottomans? Every non-Muslim paid a tax in the Ottoman Empire. They were able to freely practice their religion and do whatever they wanted. They had more rights under the Ottoman Empire than they did anywhere else. And also, Muslims, on the other hand, paid a separate tax, zakat. So it's not like only the Jews paid jizya. Christians also paid jizya. Muslims paid zakat.
Chanting it and stuff, not everyone. Oh wait, hang on a second. One of its key proponents who used to chant it a lot, Itamar.
Yeah, and the jizya tax was lower than the zakat, and also did not come with an obligation to fight as well. You didn't have to serve in the military, unless you were Dev Shirmeh, which is very different. Dev Shirmeh is a practice of taking non-Muslims from a young age and then training them to become some of the best fighters in the Ottoman Empire. Anyway, I'm diving into the weeds of fucking Ottoman history now, so I'm not gonna do that.
is now Israel's Minister of National Security. Oh, it's okay though. He doesn't actually say.
I hate it when you talk about this. You fail to recognize that some things are the other way around, sometimes unfortunately too, but it's okay. We will have a conversation about minorities in the Middle East later. Balkan chatters light the fuck up whenever I talk about this. It's not something that I am defending. I am not defending any of these practices. I do not think that the Shirme system was good. Okay? Holy fuck, dude. My mom is yelling from the other room saying the Byzantines used it as well.
Death to Arabs anymore. Here's a video of him saying that he now says death to terrorists and encourages others because it is legal with a government stamp of approval. But when you consider that this man refers to all Palestinians as terrorists, including the mother of an autistic Palestinian who was murdered in cold blood by Israeli security forces, what is there to say? This guy has transformed Israel's prisons into even worse torture dungeons than they already were. I mean, there's decades of the horrifying treatment by Israeli prison officers of Palestinians, but it's only worsened in recent years. And Ethan doesn't see this as a sickness within Israeli society. He doesn't see it as indicative of the monstrous nature of their ideology, their movement. He thinks that there is still something redeemable about Israel. But what is there redeemable about this? Why is it that you would make a video this long condemning Hasan Piker for interviewing a 19-year-old, for showing Houthi music videos? Why is it that you would spend your time doing this when Israelis are out here doing these kind of things? And it does not end there. One of the other most common chants that you consistently hear from Israeli soldiers is "May your village burn." Here's a video of the Israeli soldiers chanting it before they go out and actually do that in Gaza.
Let it burn, baby. This house is on fire. This house is on fire.
This is a man who claims that he thinks there is a genocide in the Gaza Strip, yet he spends his time talking about the Houthi slogans. He doesn't talk about the Israeli slogans. He doesn't talk about this as a sickness in Israeli society. I have said it over and over again. He sees Yemenis and Middle Easterners who are not Jewish from Israel as monstrous savages, whose ideologies are different, whose motivations are different to those of Israel, Jewish people and Americans. He is a man who exceptionalizes the state of Israel in order to make himself feel better about his horrifying right-wing views which justify the slaughter of scores and scores of colonized people across the entire region. But all of that's okay because, as Ethan puts it, they're the bad guys.
Israeli Rudy was saying that Palestinians are taught at 2 years old to kill Americans.
That's pretty spicy.
Yeah.
Do we have that one?
Like Kamala,
the other one.
I could add it.
You're excusing people being burned alive and kids being murdered. You're saying Israel does that on the daily. Okay. Now I'm not denying that. I'm not denying that. So are you denying that? So are you not denying that? So are you
Now look, I don't want to critique Ethan's personal relationship with his wife, Hila Klein, or the Raider of Ramallah as she is sometimes known, because it's ultimately unimportant for this video. But what is important is that it is one of the clear reasons that he deploys Orientalism, to make himself feel better about the clear incongruency between his consistent lack of condemnation of his wife and her behaviour and his constant condemnation of people like Rashid al-Haddad, who have never even served in a military, yet he sees them as terrorists. Now, as I'm sure that many of you know, Hila served in the IOF, the Israeli military. It's where she came by the nickname the Raider of Ramallah, and she maintains that, she was just doing a desk job for a senior IOF terrorist, a senior figure within Israel's occupation. She was just doing a desk job for him. But then she got bored and one day wanted to go onto a raid in Ramallah, a space which Ethan refers to as a terrorist city. Just watch this clip.
Forced up, because what did you do? What was your role in the military?
At first, I was given a role that was like in an office somewhat close to my house in Tel Aviv. And it was kind of like going to a day job in an office. It happened right after there was some kind of a second war in, where was it, in Gaza?
I remember that, yeah.
There was some sort of a small war when I was there. And so my job was to, like, when they sent officers or like people to go serve, I had to like logistically help with like their hotel or a room, things like that. But it was all on the computer. It just felt like some computer thing.
Right, okay. So secretary.
Yeah.
Interesting.
And it was super boring and I really hated it. Because it was just like, I had to take a bus super early, go there, spend the whole day, go back home. I hated it. So I tried to change my role. And it was something like you can apply for it and it's a form that you fill out and then they're going to give you something else completely random.
Different
you have no
position,
idea.
different post,
yeah.
different location.
So I decided to do that. And if I don't like the second one, then I'll just find a way to get out of the army.
Was that bad?
Yeah, I hated everything about it. Didn't want to do it. Because if you're doing something that it felt like I wasn't doing anything, I was just wasting my life.
Yeah.
It could get really.
Dude, that's what's so crazy about it is like I didn't know this clip existed at the time when I did Leftovers with Ethan. And like I had seen some of the things that Ethan has said at the very least about Israel, and my assumption immediately was like, there's no way that they would ever be defensive of Israel post October 7. You know what I mean? It was just like it's Ethan himself has said so many things about Israel, about how it fucking sucks dick. You know what I mean? Just like how awful it was. And it's wild that he's just done an about face on it, but in the opposite direction since then.
Really frustrating. I don't know.
Right.
And you got to do it for 2 years.
Right.
So I filled out that form and I tried it, and then I somehow ended up in a better place that I liked a lot more. Before it was a daily thing where you go back home every day, and the new one was in a way that was a base that was far from my house. So you go there for the whole week and then you come back for the weekend.
So you preferred that? Were you gone for a whole week?
I did.
Interesting. Why?
It was kind of like just more of an adventure, more of a different experience that I preferred than to just go to a boring job, sit on the computer and go back home at the end of every day. I don't know.
Were you doing secretary work there?
So yeah, I was the secretary of the head of the. There's like I don't know the terms in English from the army.
Right. Who's that officer?
So there was I was in Duchifat, which is like a brigade, I guess, that's in charge of the area of Ramallah. And that brigade has like a main officer. So I was his secretary.
Okay, so you were right below the big boy. Cool.
So it was nice. It was interesting. It was more demanding in a way, but also kind of more rewarding because
you told me once you went on like a mission with them to like a terrorist city.
Yeah.
That was kind of a crazy story.
Yeah. So my officers and like the soldiers in that brigade, they would go every night on a raid in Ramallah to arrest terrorists. And so
that nighttime raid by people who were also in the Israeli occupying forces that then joined Breaking the Silence, which is a philanthropic organization comprised of former Israeli occupying force vets who are against the occupation, has been clearly branded as an act of terror, for the record. It is not to arrest terrorists. You would be the terrorist by the legal standard in that instance. You're not supposed to be there. You're not supposed to be there as an occupying force. You're not supposed to be there with arms. Israel's illegally occupying Ramallah, as well as the rest of the West Bank. Make no mistake. Okay? And the purpose of those night raids is not to actually arrest terrorists. The purpose of those night raids, which, by the way, everyone's a terrorist according to Israel. The purpose of those night raids is to instill terror. Ironically enough, it is to make your presence known, to constantly be a force upon the Palestinian population, an illegal force. This isn't like just immoral. It is also illegal.
So I always saw them preparing for it and leaving, and then I would stay in the base. So
a big part of this also was documented in the now Oscar award-winning documentary, No Other Land. Actions such as the one that she partook in.
Time I wanted to go with them just to experience it.
Why, you just were all of a sudden had an urge to go with them?
I just wanted to see what it's like. I wanted to see it.
And there you have it. She did this because she was bored. So why doesn't Ethan condemn her as an evil terrorist? why doesn't he think that she should be destroyed along with members of the Houthis? What is the difference between her and a Yemeni person who hasn't even fought against another country? Well, let's actually just have a look at more of what these two have to say.
To serve like everybody else in the country. I mean, it's a very selfish move to decide, okay, I'm not going to do it, but everybody else will.
Like Israel as a...
I think here they're talking about me not serving in the Turkish military, by the way, if I'm not mistaken.
As a place, the mentality of growing up there, like everybody feels an obligation to protect, to serve, to nurture this place that feels like the only place in the world where they can live and be Jewish and not be like discriminated against.
I mean, when you're growing up with constant terror attacks, the army is a necessity.
Yeah.
And I'm sorry if people think that's a controversial statement. That is the reality of Israel.
Oh my God.
So,
you're right. The army is a necessity. If you're a fucking occupying force, of course the army is a necessity. You're constantly terrorizing people that you're illegally occupying the lands of. Yeah, no other place on the planet except for the apartheid state of Israel where Jews can be totally safe. A place where the Israeli army is illegally occupying the lives of 2.5 million Palestinians in the West Bank in direct violation of international law. And also on the other side, another 2 million Palestinians in the beginning of Israel's genocide. Now those numbers have reduced, according to Trump's estimate, to like 1.7 million Palestinians in the Gaza Strip, dominating their lives, killing them every single fucking day. That's the only way that Jews can be safe in Israel. What a ridiculous crock of shit. I maintain the position that no country has simply a right to exist, but a country like Israel that is set up as an apartheid on the principles of ethno-religious supremacy with an exterminationist ideology on indigenous soil that they seek to eradicate and seek to destroy certainly does not fucking have a right to exist. That's ridiculous. This is not a controversial statement at all. Does Nazi Germany have a right to exist as a nation state doing the fucking Holocaust? No? Okay, then Israel doesn't either.
The person to decide, I'm not going to do it, is a very selfish decision because meanwhile you're not doing it, everybody else is doing it and putting their life on hold. Very important years of your personal development, you're putting it on hold to go do this, and it helps nothing with your career afterwards. You finish it, then you start
you don't even
your
need
actual
to defend
life.
yourself. It's just normal.
And I just want to note something before I analyse this clip here. Lying for Ethan and Gila is a very dangerous game because you have published the vast majority of your life on the internet for well over a decade now. I've been watching you since I was 14, really. And what you said, first of all, was that, Gila didn't actually want to serve in the IOF, that, she was kind of forced to. But I think...
Maybe clarify by saying no country has a right to exist. That's what I said. I literally started off by saying that. That was the first statement I made. Like the idea that like any country has a right to exist is a silly one to begin with. Like people have a right to exist, okay? But it's so funny. You didn't hear me say exactly those words verbatim and said, hey man, you better clarify.
I think what's becoming clearer is that both of you are letting the mask slip more and more, because in that original clip you claimed, oh, it was mandatory and all of these things, but now Ethan is saying that it is a necessity and Gila is saying that people who don't serve are shameful. That's not really congruent with the idea that you didn't want to serve, is it now? And Ethan and Gila are claiming here that the IOF is a necessity because of the really serious threats that Israel faces, terror every single day. But what are these threats? Where do they come from? Is there any context to them? Or are they just the result of the barbarous anti-Semitism that Jewish people face every single day in the Middle East? Well, of course they're not. And it's so ridiculous for Ethan to sit there and claim that he is pro-Palestine, because once again we can pick apart another part of his ideology. So Ethan says in the content nuke that he thinks Israeli settlers in the West Bank are colonial settlers.
Condemned Netanyahu as a war criminal. They're led by Netanyahu, who should resign in disgrace and go to prison for being a war criminal, called the West Bank settlements an abomination. Settlers in the West Bank are religious zealots, they're monsters, they're genocidal. I've even said the West Bank settlers are valid military targets.
This doesn't also make sense because, like, at the time when he said that, I didn't even realize that Gila had literally participated in a raid. What is the raid supposed to be? Why are people saying his lawyer? Like, what?
When you talk about like colonial settlers and stuff, like that's what's actually happening in the West Bank right now. And these people are more or less valid military targets, in my opinion.
I mean, I'm not really sure that he knows what this means. But anyway, he thinks they're valid military targets. But he doesn't have a problem with his wife who served in that area, who raided terrorist cities. He has no problem with that. He said just a few days ago that he is proud of what his wife did.
And like, and I mean, to me, it's like, that's shameful and it's embarrassing. Hila served her country. She did her civic duty. And I think that's a good thing, that, you know, regardless, like just in general. Right?
But at the same time, he's against the occupation. He's against the extremities of Israeli society. What does he think Israeli soldiers do in the West Bank? They're not just having fun or protecting Israel. They are maintaining Israel's colonial regime in the West Bank. They are there so as to ensure that the Israeli occupation does not face any form of serious resistance. She was arresting people, most likely for opposing it. Who knows whether that was via armed resistance or peaceful means? I mean, Israel doesn't make a distinction. It doesn't even offer people trial before it begins its horrifying torture of them. I mean, Ethan Klein is a guy who claims that he thinks that there is a genocide going on in Gaza, yet simultaneously thinks that it is shameful not to serve in the Israeli military, that it is some kind of necessity.
It doesn't. This is the problem. You have to look at like the overwhelming amount of his coverage on this issue to get a good grasp of like what he truly believes. Because there have been instances where he has said the things that he just added onto the fucking context puke. Ironically enough, the major inconsistency that is that's a great demonstration of this, a great demonstration of the other inconsistency we're talking about is the fact that he also brings up the $6,500 donation that he made to my fundraiser. Okay. That fundraiser where we raised, alongside this entire community, where we raised $1.6 million, I believe, in the immediate aftermath of October 7. He uses that to say, look, I'm pro-Palestine. Look, I gave $6,500. Like, how could I be anti-Palestine? And then he chooses to deplatform the guy whose fundraiser he gave money to, and also has continued to say, oh, these guys raise funds, the Creators for Palestine charity that we also set up together. That charity is negligible. It's meaningless. It's so stupid. My $6.5 thousand, on the other hand, very, very important. Very important. It doesn't make any sense. Like, do you see the inconsistency there? On the one hand, he thinks it's fucking stupid to fundraise for Palestine. But on the other hand, he uses that as a form to say, look, I'm pro-Palestine. You see? This is inconsistent. How does no one see this in his audience? It's just like on basic principles. This is an inconsistent position to have.
Does this guy think that actually talking about Palestine and Israel on the internet is securing him? Every single time he opens his mouth, he puts his foot in it because he has no understanding. He has no coherent position. He just condemns the excesses of Israel without ever confronting what he actually supports. And I mean, he claims that Israel is under threat. He does it in the content nuke as well. He claims, Israel's under these threats. It has been since it was established. But where do these threats come from? I mean, Hezbollah, for example. What is the actual context of it? Well, Israel invaded Lebanon in 1982. Hezbollah largely came from that. It gained legitimacy through fighting against Israel. through driving them out in 2000, driving them out in 2006. It became popular. Lebanese people liked it because it stood up to Israel. And by the way, the crimes that Israel has committed against the Lebanese people are truly unbelievable. Since the ceasefire came into effect, who is the one terrorizing the people of Lebanon? Who is the one consistently carrying out bombardments during a ceasefire? It is absolutely obscene that this man sits here and tries to overplay the threats that Israel faces that come from its settler colonial nature. And the same goes for the terror attacks. Look, innocent civilians being killed is not a good thing, but Ethan claims that he opposes colonial settlers. He claims that he thinks there is a genocide. He says all of these things, but he lets his wife go on about how there are terror attacks every day. Does he not see that since the inception of the Zionist project in the early 20th century, Palestinians realized that they had to resist against what the Zionists were doing? They knew that the Zionists wanted to build a state that did not involve the Palestinians, where the Zionist project would be dominant over them. And so Palestinians have resisted ever since that date. And Ethan even seems to say that he thinks settlers in the West Bank are valid targets, but he doesn't carry that same energy for people who settle outside the Gaza Strip, who live on the lands of the people who were expelled to Gaza in 1948 during the Nakba. He doesn't.
Ironically, this is something that I try to get him to understand as well.
Doesn't care about that, you know, that doesn't matter. He's more interested in trying to talk about the Mizrahi Jewish people brought over to Israel after the expulsion of the Palestinians, rather than talking about the suffering of the Palestinians and actually contextualizing why they might resist.
What is this? Man really typing, supporting central authority while never making eye contact. Bro's typing Marxist takes with a fingernail he can measure rice with. Standing the state but can't handle eye contact or finish wetting toilet seats. Guy in here just alt-tab to reread his own Discord messages for tone. You don't have to look over your shoulder. It must be weird seeing yourself in the reflection of your screen when you're trying to disappear. Someone just adjusted their glasses and held their breath for 3 seconds. Love how some people in the chat like they're scared their professor's going to grade their casual text messages. Man really out here typing with fingernails longer than his attention span. Imagine defending China while sounding like you're asking permission to speak every time. Who the fuck is this guy talking about? Is he talking about me? What the fuck? Are you all right, dude? Why are you reading all that? I don't know. He got fucking timed out. It's crazy. I think he just needs medical attention.
Would rather resort to, as he did with the Houthis and any other group, claiming that they are some kind of violent anti-Semitic savages. For Ethan, militant groups in the Middle East are irrational savages who carry out violence against Israel and America because of their horrifying ideologies. But people like Hila, who serve in the Israeli military, an entity who, as I have said over and over again, engages in all of the crimes which Ethan allegedly so hates, he thinks that that is a necessity. He thinks that she is some kind of rational person. But what is rational about defending the colonization of an indigenous people's land? He says that he thinks Benjamin Netanyahu is a war criminal, but he thinks it's necessary for Israeli soldiers to serve in it, and he thereby condemns the tiny amount of Israelis with an actual conscience who don't serve and go to prison for a few months. People like Tal Mitnick, who I've actually spoken to, who I said over and over again, oh, it's a brave thing what you're doing, and he said, nah, laughing my ass off, it's the bare minimum, because the truth
I've had Tal on this broadcast as well.
Is that how can you sit there and say, oh, I think there's a genocide going on, I think that Netanyahu's a war criminal, but not say, actually, it's wrong to help and aid and abet that. Hila served in the Israeli military on the back end of the Second Intifada, a period which is often portrayed as explosive Palestinian violence, where poor Israeli civilians were targeted for no reason. But it, of course, has context. It came after a major provocation by Ariel Sharon, and it...
Murad is watching me right now from right now. He's standing right next to me, away from the camera. And I said, what's up? What are you doing? And he went, Philip DeFranco is not live this week, so I'm forced to watch you instead. I need to beat his ass, dude. Worst brother of all time.
Also led to the murder of 4 times as many Palestinians. They also received horrifying collective punishment. The Jenin refugee camp was leveled. I mean, look at this photo. There were mass curfews, schools closed, people arrested, beaten, homes taken over by Israeli soldiers, and massive torture of Palestinians. How dare you sit there and make a distinction between your wife, who had no problem with serving in an army that did those things, and by the way, also took huge amounts of human shields. Here are articles about it. How dare you sit there and somehow try and make that acceptable? Something that you say you are proud of. You may say that your wife is just a secretary, but Israel's occupation of the West Bank, its torturous regime, its brutalization and murder of innocent Palestinians would not be possible without those desk secretaries who make the cogs go round. This man's politics are right-wing and disgusting, and he makes himself feel better about them by just deploying Orientalism, by portraying Israel and America as enlightened countries who don't engage in misogyny, slavery, bigotry against other people, who aren't irrational, who aren't hateful. But of course, he is unwilling to confront the fact that these are all charges which should be levelled against Israel and America, who have perpetrated them on far grander scales than any group he hates. Now let's move on to some clips of Ethan spreading some of the most despicable Zionist talking points that have been utilised to perpetrate Israel's horrifying crimes in the Gaza Strip.
When civilians fucking get murdered in Gaza, that's a dub for Hamas because it raises it creates more pressure on Israel from the outside forces. He's got more people talking, more people outraged. So it's both. It is both Israel is blowing up buildings and killing a ton of innocent people. But people who pretend that Hamas is anything but a fucking barbaric terrorist group that intentionally kills its own people for political gain is lying to themselves, dude. Holy shit. They literally put fucking command centers under hospitals. That's not even debated.
It is.
They were keeping some of the hostages in.
It's actually not debated, but not in the direction that Ethan thinks. Yes, it's not debated because Israel made this false claim, and then nobody really followed through on it when they showed zero evidence to suggest the matter. So the idea that Hamas puts command and control centers is not debated is a correct statement, just not in the direction that Ethan thinks. He's wrong.
In hospitals too. It seems like a lot of them ran through hospitals. That's it. I mean, it's just logical, right?
Now, for someone who is self-proclaimed to be against the genocide in the Gaza Strip and also pro-Palestinian, to hear a talking point like this spread is truly disgusting. You cannot reconcile these two things because all of the evidence points to the fact that Israel has lied. It has been unable to support outrageous claims that it made, such as the claim that there was a terror base and command center under the Al-Shifa hospital that was used to raid it to make patients there suffer. And I mean, babies literally died in their incubators because they had to be left. They rotted and decomposed because of talking points like this. Israel has struck and targeted hospitals over and over again because of talking points like this. It has arrested Palestinian doctors, tortured them to death, perhaps even sexually, like Adnan al-Bursh. But for pro-Palestinian anti-genocide Ethan Klein, there's no debate about it. But that's just not true. Just a few months ago, one of the International Criminal Court's lead prosecutors, Andrew Cayley, noted claims of Hamas in hospitals had been grossly exaggerated. This is a man who was appointed by the UK's...
Have you considered that he was saying that anti-Semitically? Have you considered that he is pro-Hamas?
Most racist Home Secretary in its recent history, Suella Braverman, a woman who is unequivocally pro-Israel, and he is saying this. He is saying that it is likely Israel has grossly exaggerated its claims. Then you have Forensic Architecture, who highlighted that Israel lied at the International Court of Justice about a militant fighting inside hospital boundaries. They debunked it, clearly. People do not want to talk about this. And then let's move on to what Craig Mohiba said. As he noted, the mere presence of armed forces of members of the enemy in populated civilian areas does not constitute the use of human shields. Indeed, Israel should carefully consider the implications of its repeated claims that it does, given that it maintains its military headquarters in a busy section of Tel Aviv. Ethan has spread one of the most deadly Zionist lies. It is truly despicable. For this man to try and sit there and claim that he is pro-Palestine is utterly obscene. And it's provable that the Israeli military just make up numbers when it comes to claims about terrorists or militants. You had this Haaretz article which stated that of 200 people who crossed an arbitrary line invented by Israel, which they executed, less than 10% of them had any link to Hamas. Or you have this article from the BBC about Israel's bombardment of Lebanon, where Israel made the claim, oh, we were bombing a Hezbollah command center, we were only targeting militants, we were eliminating Hezbollah commanders. But of the 73 people killed, only 68 of which could be verified, likely because they were torn to shreds and their families will never even get to bury them. Only 6 of them had links to Hezbollah's military wing. None of them held a senior rank. The other 62 of them were civilians, 23 children. And they were killed. And Israel lied, and people like Ethan believe it, and they show it to their audience of millions of people. Tell them these kind of lies that are currently killing people in the Middle East. These are the claims which undergird Israel's genocide. This is the way that the consent is manufactured, which makes Israel's slaughter possible. This is why people are so anti-Israel, America, and the media in our countries. And as I have said over and over again, to the point where it is getting tired, for someone who claims to be pro-Palestine and anti-genocide to say these things is despicable, but it still shows you his Orientalism, this distinction in the way that the other fights. They are savages who lie, who want their own civilians killed, not like Israel. No, Israel's a moral nation. His wife was in their army, it's something that he's proud of. And I'd like to end with a very short segment about the recent anti-Hamas protests in Gaza that Ethan, like many other liberals who purport to be pro-Palestine but in reality are Zionists, has not been able to get over.
Ethan said you wouldn't have a career if you didn't have a podcast with him, Lamau. I think I'd probably have a better career right now if I never encountered Ethan Klein, if I'm being totally honest. A big part of his haters... and even like members, like a lot of content creators on the left put me in the crosshairs for my association with him and started dunking on me way fucking harder. Like it was definitely a reputational hit. You hadn't heard that, Lamau? No, I had not heard that. The reason why Ethan had me on as a co-host on his podcast was not because he was giving me a leg up. The fuck? I was averaging 30,000 viewers back then. The fuck is he talking about? If anything, it probably was reputational damage. He said you had under 10K viewers prior to October 7 and that the podcast revived you. Wait, what? Yeah, I think he, I don't know, whatever. Yeah, sure.
This man has been so excited about them. He's found a new way to condemn Hasan, to say, oh, he's more pro-Hamas than me. Oh, I think that these are the only way to end Israel's genocide, and they're going to be brilliant. But what I would like to say is, look, no one who knows anything about Palestine should be surprised that there is anti-Hamas sentiment in Gaza. Life is very difficult in the Gaza Strip. During times like this, people turn against their government. And so I wouldn't actually have a problem with Ethan covering them if he hadn't used them as yet another way to excuse Israel's genocide. Because Ethan has posted a plethora of stories about this, but I just want you to watch this very short clip where Ethan effectively says that the...
No, he specifically said that you do pro-Palestine content for the clout, not recognizing that your viewership took a hit because of it. Perhaps if that was the case, maybe he could use a little bit of that clout by doing actually pro-Palestine content then. Ironically enough, a third of my community left because of my insistence on covering Israel's atrocities every single day after October 7, including the podcast that I had with Ethan that he did not want to continue doing because of our disagreements on Israel, and also the fact that he could not handle the backlash that he was receiving. Yeah. Also, I covered Palestinian emancipation extensively before our podcast. I covered it before October 7 as well.
These are the only means to end Israel's genocide.
The reason you don't see this, and I mean, Israel's forced them into a point of desperation where like they're willing to risk their lives, but like protesting against Hamas publicly is a grim...
You lost so many viewers out to 10-7 for standing by your beliefs. He cannot imagine that. No, he can, because he's losing viewers because he's standing by his beliefs. The problem is his beliefs are fucking immoral. That's the difference. And also inside of him, there is like still a conscience that is probably putting him at odds with his output, putting him at odds with what he's saying about Israel. He has to maintain this like moral superiority about being pro-Palestine. He has to lie to himself.
It's a grim outlook. That is not something you want to do. Hamas, just read their charter. Listen to what they say. They're Islamic. They're violent.
They're Islamic.
And, you know, protesters, and it's known that protesters, people that there are who dissent against Hamas, get scooped up, get punished, disappear.
Now, if at this point you don't believe that Ethan is Orientalist and creates a distinction between them and us, he literally refers to one of the reasons for Hamas being so dangerous as them being Islamic. I think if I were to say that Israel is the way it is because it is Jewish, he would make videos about me calling me an anti-Semite.
Oh yeah. 100p. 100p. As a matter of fact, he does that anyway. Like, he does that when people make the distinction between Zionism and Judaism, which is the truth, by the way, despite the endless efforts to conflate the two falsely. Ethan will turn around and say, all Jews are Zionists, and you're basically just substituting Jew for the term Zionist. So much so that his advocacy on the matter, paired up with the Anti-Defamation League, also known by its common name, the Apartheid Defense League, went and got the term Zionist barred. In Twitch TOS, they made Zionist a protected subcategory. It would be like Twitch saying, yeah, you can't say Nazi. It's a protected category. That was after Ethan's attempts of not only deplatforming me, but going after Twitch, the entire platform, claiming that this platform was the most anti-Semitic platform of all time, despite the fact that he was doing this on YouTube, where many of the content creators he claimed were, being anti-Semitic alongside actual anti-Semitic content creators, still have a career on that platform that he's on.
Completely insane that he would say this, especially when you consider that Israel's violence against non-violent protesters is off the charts. During the First Intifada, a mass uprising that was largely non-violent, Israel deployed some of the most horrifying torture that you could possibly imagine. And you can read about how horrifying this torture was in texts such as on Gaza Beach. Yitzhak Rabin, someone who is considered one of the most peace-loving Israeli prime ministers, issued an order to break the bones of non-violent protesters. And this isn't something that went away.
Bro is still obsessing over Ethan, not like he makes a comedy podcast. I don't know. I don't think it's really funny to do genocide defense over and over again. Also, it's really hilarious to say I'm the one obsessing over Ethan when every single time I even briefly cover the subject matter, let alone an entire video from a separate content creator dissecting some of the insane things that he's done, chatters come to me with 100 different instances where he has said something absolutely insane over the course of the past couple of weeks that I didn't even fucking know about. I also said he is supposed to be a comedian, and he said he wasn't one. So I don't know which one it is. Rent free? Okay, chatter. Yeah. Rent free. You're right. So rent free that the person that I'm rent free in the mind of is saying he wants to sue me and apparently talk to a fucking civil litigator the other day about possibly getting me charged with promoting domestic terrorism. How many Instagram stories have I made about Ethan Klein? How many Instagram stories he's made about me? How many episodes has he talked about me? How many episodes has he dedicated entirely to me or my friends? It's pretty funny that I don't have to actually say anything. He just constantly gets in trouble on his own because everyone can see that he is behaving in this hysterical manner.
Israel's response to the Great March of Return, a march that initially was not supported by Hamas, although later they didn't come out against it, but was largely non-violent. Israel responded by shooting Palestinians. Look at this one, where an Israeli sniper brags about maiming 42 Palestinians in one day. These were horrifying, traumatic injuries that led to people losing their legs and being unable to walk. But Ethan would never dare to say that Israel is an innately violent country, that it is this way because it is Jewish. No, because that's not acceptable. But when
Ethan accused Sam Cedar of saying the N-word, then stories about the backlash by talking about you? What? What?
When it comes to Muslims and people from the Middle East, he sees them as different. He sees the way they behave.
He said you watched that clip yesterday, Lamau.
As unacceptable because of where they come from and because of the fact that they challenge the dominance of the West and Israel.
I mean, listen, I feel like this is a force that's going to help end the war, not fucking keeping hostages and underground and like sending, just continuing to provoke Israel to attack them.
And the core problem with this is that the Israeli government doesn't care about the hostages. The Israeli government doesn't care about Hamas. Just a few days ago, Benjamin Netanyahu stated that voluntary migration was the plan, that they would control the Gaza Strip, that's it. They're not hiding it. It's a plan. Anyone can discuss it with them. They are openly planning to ethnically cleanse 2 million people. Why are you obsessing over these protests? They are not going to save the Palestinians. They are not going to end the suffering. The genocide that you allegedly condemn, the thing that you have spread the propaganda that has enabled, Israel is just ramping up the destruction. It's why they blew up the Turkish cancer hospital, the only cancer hospital in the Gaza Strip. No one's going to be getting any cancer treatment there anymore. Where are they going to have to go? Other countries. They won't come back. Gaza is gone to the Zionists, and anyone who is going, well, if Hamas released the hostages, it would save everything, is wrong. The only answer to this situation is massive, massive pressure on Israel. But that's not what Ethan wants. Ethan is planning on taking a trip to Israel to show you its real side. But what real side is there to Israel when it is a country that is openly planning to perpetrate the greatest crime of the 21st century? You can say, oh, I don't like Netanyahu, I don't like this, I don't like that. It won't change anything. The Israeli military that you are proud of your wife serving in is going to expel millions of Palestinians from Gaza. Then it will turn on the West Bank. Then it will turn on Palestinians inside Israel proper. And you want to go and show your supporters this wonderful side to it. It is one of the most obscene and shocking things that
Zone of interest, straight up,
has come out of Ethan Klein's mouth over the last year and a half. Because it is not only that as he goes, Israel will be implementing its plan to expel 2 million people, it is also that what he loves and enjoys about Israel is inextricably linked from the dispossession, marginalization, and extermination of the Palestinian people historically, the Nakba, the consistent displacement of Palestinians. But it is also linked to the fact that only a few hundred miles away, if even that, in the West Bank, Palestinians will be being expelled. Communities will be being wiped away. There will be violent pogroms against Palestinians. And Ethan is just going to ignore it. He will not care because he wants to show you the real side. But the two are inextricably linked. So Ethan Klein is a confused Zionist who wishes to disavow the most extreme and unacceptable aspect of Israel's genocidal violence against Palestinians, but he cannot abandon his Zionism. He is unwilling to see that Hamas, far from being the sickness, is but a symptom of Israeli settler colonialism, the true sickness that plagues Palestine. From its very inception, Zionism was rejected and resisted by the indigenous Palestinian people. They never wanted to give Palestine away to colonizers who came with the explicit goal of marginalizing the population of Palestine, destroying their alternative mode of existence, and eliminating their cultural and historical contributions to the land of Palestine. And so until Ethan can see that there is no Zionism without the Nakba, without the current expulsion of Palestinians, without the settlement in the West Bank, this man will remain forever a confused Zionist who will continue to aid and abet Israel's extermination of the Palestinian people.